The beaches along the Delaware Bay will soon come alive with horseshoe crabs, along with red knots and other migrating shorebirds that eat the crab eggs. A recent study published by Frontiers in Ecology and Evolution raises concerns about another threat to the federally threatened shorebird. David Newstead of the Texas Coastal Bend, Bays, and Estuaries program, and Larry Niles, who has been studying the red knot populations for decades, along with other researchers, examined the survival rate of the species on northern Gulf of Mexico beaches in Texas, Louisiana, and Florida over a 10-year period. Leg-mounted geolocators were used to track the birds. The Florida population uses the East Coast Flyway and migrates through the Delaware Bay. The study found the red knots on the Gulf beaches had a 76 to 80% survival rate. That's much lower than the survival rate being used by federal agencies.
It's very important because the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and the USGS have all contributed to this model, that a mathematical model that is very complicated. Almost no one understands it, but at the output of that model is that it justifies the killing of horseshoe crabs. So essentially what it's saying is that the survival rate of red knots is so high that nobody has to worry about the fact that we're killing horseshoe crabs, because there's no relationship between horseshoe crabs and red knots. That's what the agencies are saying. But see, what David's study has shown, the lower survival rate, agrees with more robust studies of survival rate that were done by the Canadian Wildlife Service and others that point to a much lower survival rate, like somewhere around 75% to 80%. And see, that's a world of difference, because a population at 93% is going up, but a population at 0.80 and 75 or 75%, 80% is going down.
During the study period, a number of red tides struck along the Gulf beaches. Niles said the red knots ate shellfish carrying the toxins.
So we started seeing birds. We found dead birds. We found several birds that were just sort of walking along the beach, and we could walk up and actually catch them with our hand. That's how disoriented they were. There was one bird that we caught by hand. We took it to a rehabber, and it only weighed 72 grams. And fat-free weight for a red knot is like 125 grams. So this bird had suffered all the way down to a weight that it really shouldn't have been alive.
Warmer waters fueled by climate change helped create red tides, and the study found the red tide events took a toll on the red knots in the Gulf.
And what he found was that the survival rate could go down as low as 50%. So in other words, half the population dies from one year to the next. So no population can survive that.
A ban on taking female horseshoe crabs remains in place, and the Delaware Riverkeeper Network is one of 20 environmental groups that have filed a petition with the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration requesting endangered and threatened species status for horseshoe crabs.
It adds, David's study adds to the studies of a number of other people that say the ASMFC is inflating the data that concerns red knots to justify the killing of horseshoe crabs. If they embrace these survival rates, then it would be very likely that horseshoe crabs are vital to their survival and that there should be no more killing.
Niles says the decline of the crabs points to a troubling trend in the Delaware Bay.
The larger story is the agencies are allowing the consumption of all of the species that underpin the productivity of Delaware Bay. And so they're taking the horseshoe crabs, they're taking eels, they're taking menhaden, and so essentially leaving nothing in the bay to allow the bay to become productive. And see, the horseshoe crab is the visible part of that. Like, we can see horseshoe crabs. We can see that they're 1/5 of the density that they once were. But see, we don't see what's going on with menhaden and eels and all the other forage fish that fish depend on. So what we're after isn't just to improve red knots or horseshoe crabs. We're after restoring the Delaware Bay ecosystem.